So without further ado, Paul, I'm going to ask you to unmute and bring up your presentation. And once again, so grateful to have you joining us today, Paul. Paul's a great friend, once again, a member of RESDC, and his presentation, they come from far and wide to see Paul's presentations. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Well, thank you, Mark, and welcome everybody. Happy International Women's Day today. And I know, I'm sure you're reflecting on life like I am right now as a retired employee, and we're living in some very challenging, troubling times. You know, I was just listening to the radio, and the fact that for the first time ever in the House of Commons, a foreign leader, a president, addressed the whole House of Commons in the chamber through video satellite link up, and actually quoted Winston Churchill and William Shakespeare in a very powerful speech. So these are challenging times for Ukraine, but also for our older generations. So I'm grateful to Mark for allowing me this opportunity to share some things that I've seen over the last couple of years. I still call myself newly retired, okay? Even though it's been 4 years almost to the day that I walked out of the Hall of Justice as a retired Deputy District Attorney. I'm so glad I see at least a couple of people I recognize their names, Bruce Silver and Susan Mallett from the DA's office. Maybe there's some others who hide their names, but thank you all for being here. And I think we all agree we're very fortunate to be retired employees of the County of San Diego with their financial backing that we've had. For any of you who've not heard me before, I was a lawyer in England for 13 years. They called me a solicitor. So when I first arrived in San Diego and I walked into the bank to cash some money, and they said no solicitors allowed, I was crushed. And anyway, solicitors, barristers, I started life out as a junior barrister, but didn't look good in the white wig and the black gown. So I was 13 years as a solicitor. So how did I become a San Diego prosecutor? Well, true love. This is my wife, Sue, for whom I've been married for almost 44 years. She's from San Diego. Grew up in University City, went to Claremont High School, and I had the great fortune to literally be traveling through California back in August of 1973, and I walked into a Baptist church in University City, not knowing anybody, and the only empty seat was sitting next to this gorgeous young lady. 5 years later, we were married, and she truly is the love of my life. So she's the reason why we came back to San Diego in March of 1991. March is a big month. It's the month when I began at the DA's office. It's the month that I retired from the DA's office. It's the month that I came to San Diego. And it's the month in which I was born as well. So as I say, we left in 1991, arrived here with a 10-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. I was jobless, totally unqualified. So I had to sit for that dreaded thing called the bar exam. But after 13 years as a lawyer, I knew one thing: how do I hoodwink the bar examiners into believing that I knew more than I really did? Well, it must have worked because they gave me a pass. So that was very, very thankful for that. I joined a civil law firm for 2 years in Mission Valley and then downtown, but I didn't enjoy it. I've never been a civil litigator, and I've only enjoyed being in the criminal arena. So I got my big break in 1993 when I got a chance to be interviewed for the DA's office. They took a risk on me. I was the first ever green card resident alien that they'd ever hired as a prosecutor, and I'm so glad that they took the chance with me. I can honestly tell you that not one day in my 25 years in the office did I ever regret being a prosecutor. I loved every minute of it. But the numbers were very important to me, and I thought, well, look at that number, 25. That looks like a cool number to retire from, so I did. This number also impacted my decision to leave because I had just turned 66 in March of 2018. In fact, next Tuesday, a week from now, I am celebrating my 70th birthday, and I'm still trying to come to terms with that. But at 66, as possibly many of you have found out, this is a wonderful thing that can happen to you when you're in full-time employment. Suddenly, there's this gift of Social Security. So, my favorite day of the month is the third Wednesday. But also, and I think you will relate to this, when we get into this age bracket, things change. And compare what life was like back in 1979 to what it was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Do you see the difference? Maybe there's one or two things here that you can really connect with as how times change. So I figured, well, I better make my move now while I can still do certain things. But also, I was very fortunate in that I've been mentoring a younger, very talented prosecutor called Scott Perello, and he has just taken this program even further. This number also impacted my decision to leave. No, this is not my county pension, okay? Just in case you were wondering whether the deferred compensation scheme really works. No, that's not it. This is the headline. And what was happening in early 2018, I was getting calls literally from all over America, from police agencies, from adult protective services, from ombudsmen, from prosecutors even, and they were all basically asking the same thing. Mr. Greenwood, we've heard about your successful program in San Diego. Is there any chance you can come out to our jurisdiction for 24 hours and give us a training? And I realized that if I was going to do that, then my day job would suffer. And so the time has come, I felt, for me to share the experiences I've learned with a wider audience. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years, and I really enjoy that. This also impacted my decision to leave because my wife and I were celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary, and we decided that the best gift we could give to each other was time. And boy, little did we know then that we would spend a lot more time together thanks to lockdown. And then these two numbers impacted my decision to leave. That's my daughter and son-in-law and our twin girl granddaughters who are now aged 10. And then the plus one is my son who's up in San Francisco, and he's the entrepreneur in the family, and he has invented the world's first ever underwater virtual reality. If ever you find yourself at Lawrence Welk in Escondido, he's actually sold the system to them. So you can swim underwater at Lawrence Welk in their big swimming pool, swim with virtual sharks, stingrays, shipwrecks. It's very, very cool. So my journey in this whole field began in January of 1996, all thanks to our local county adult protective services who were courageous enough to challenge my boss at the time, Paul Finkst, that our office was ignoring a huge escalating crime. This became my assignment for 22 years, which is very unusual in the DA's office. It's typically a 3 to 5 year stint in any particular rotation, and then you move on. But this became my passion and still is. And the reason being, actually two reasons, my mom and dad. And sadly, I lost my dad in December of 2014, to advanced Alzheimer's, age 92. And I lost my mom, age 96, in November of 2019. But my dad was a true hero. I found out that he'd been a B-25 bomber pilot in World War II. And I grew up with stories of World War II. Some of the graphic images I've been watching on the TV the last few days from Ukraine, it's caused me to have flashbacks to the stories that my parents told me, the evacuations from London on the train out into the suburbs, into the countryside, where my mother was separated from her brother and from her family, and the bombings and the shellings that went on. And my mom, what can I tell you about her? She was the best baker of scones in the United Kingdom. Just amazing. So I am one of those people that believes that my parents' generation is and always will be the finest generation. So back in 96, they gave me everything I needed, right? An office, a phone, a computer, but there was one major problem: no cases, just silence. And I think you can understand why there is so much silence revolving around this crime. And this poster became my motivation for the next 22 years, and in fact still is today. And I always ask myself, what can I do today to help break the silence? And I'm hoping that maybe there's something you can be doing to break the silence as well. Canada said it well. They said elder abuse thrives on silence. And the Attorney General for Kansas has called elder abuse the silent epidemic of our time. So silence is a huge problem. But, gradually over time, and it wasn't overnight, but gradually we were able to overcome some of these big barriers. that often hinder investigations and prosecutions. And silence was one of the biggest barriers. And just to give you a gauge, by the end of the first year, we filed about 12 or so cases. And then when I left, we were filing over 400 cases a year. So you can see the growth. And obviously that will continue to grow as more and more cases of elder abuse emerge. But silence and demographics are still a major issue today. You know, Sandag prepared this report a couple of years ago, which I thought was really interesting. And if you just take a moment to see the graph there at the bottom, the red shows the population of the County of San Diego in 2016 over 60, and then the gray is in 2050. And you can see how it fluctuates and over time. You look at the proportion in gray to red as you go through to 2050, okay? You'll see that the over 80s is going to be a much larger proportion than it was in 2016. And this is also very interesting, giving you common reasons that elders don't report being a victim. And I also saw this was a really interesting statistic, that over 60s represent 19% of the county population, but represent 90% of victims of embezzlement or fraud or theft. So it's a very telling feature that most of the victims are indeed over 60. And when you add this pandemic that we've all been struggling with for now 2 years, because it was basically, for me, March the 5th, when I returned from burying my parents' ashes together in a plot in the village where they met during the war. It was March the 5th and I came back 2 years ago. And of course, then we went into lockdown on about March the 16th in California. So when you add this pandemic to the silence, what happens? You end up with this perfect opportunity for perpetrators to go about their business almost unhindered, unnoticed, uninvestigated, and unprosecuted. And the headlines that we've been seeing over the last 2 years reflect that. So, for example, they call elder financial abuse now the virtual pandemic. And it's rising and rising, rising. So, you know, consistently across the board, we're seeing the media reporting what they're hearing. I mean, everyone's using the same language. And what is also interesting is that as we are hopefully, thankfully coming out the other side, we are going to see a spike in the number of cases that are being reported and discovered of financial exploitation, particularly, but also physical abuse. But one of the reasons is that during the peak of the pandemic, when offices, county employees, such as Adult Protective Services, were being asked to change their style of responding, it was more likely than not that elder abuse was not going to be reported or was not going to be noticed, because the support networks were either down in numbers because of sickness, or were unable to respond quickly enough, or were unable to actually go inside the households of the alleged victims of these crimes. And so often the discovery of the crime only occurs when you're inside the residence and you get to feel what's going on. Zoom is all well and good, but you can't really connect with somebody over Zoom when you're trying to establish whether or not they're a victim. So when the pandemic ebbs, expect a tsunami of new cases. That's what we are being told. And I'm sure once the stats come out this year, we will see that from now onwards through the summer, we're going to see an uptick of the number of reports, particularly of financial abuse, because sometimes financial abuse cases don't get discovered for several months. whereas physical abuse is typically more easily recognized and dealt with. But one of the biggest reasons why there's been a rise in elder abuse during the pandemic, and this is not rocket science, right? It's because of isolation. And it's very clear that the fact that so many older adults in San Diego and beyond have been forced into a bubble, and a bubble into which family members, neighbors, friends were not able to access. So many people's lifestyle changed dramatically. A lot of seniors are men and women of faith, but for 2 years, they've not felt comfortable returning to their place of worship. And the fact is that isolation can produce so many other issues: depression, loneliness. And so when you add those components in, it impacts the mental well-being of the person. And if the mental well-being is deteriorating, that's when the predator has a better opportunity of taking advantage. Loneliness is a huge factor. And maybe it's the phone call that comes in from the scammer that will actually relieve the victim of some of the loneliness. So it's an issue that is of great concern to all of us. And now that hopefully we are beginning to venture out, socialize a bit more, I'm hoping that many of you, as you do that, you will possibly spot somebody who has become a victim. You know, one of my mentors over the years is Dr. Laura Mosqueda. She's out of USC. She is the founder of the National Center on Elder Abuse. She is, I think, the premier geriatrician in this country. And she kind of says it like this, is we know that the dangers of socialization are significant for older adults. And we try to say to people before the pandemic, you know, don't isolate yourself. And then when the pandemic arrived, what do we tell everybody? Isolate yourself. Look at this. 1 in 4 older adults report anxiety or depression. So this is big news, and the predators know it, and they are going to find a way to exploit somebody who's battling with depression or anxiety. So isolation plus loneliness equals opportunity. And because of this, many older adults in San Diego and across California and across the country have become victims of various types of fraud. Particularly when you are alone and the only real communication you have with the outside world could well be your telephone. Yes, there are still people who have a landline. Can you believe it? Actually, I have one here, and I'm glad I do. And yet a lot of older adults also have their smartphones too, and we get those calls on there. The US Senate Committee on Aging has highlighted every year different scams that have been targeting our seniors. This is the ones they think are the top 5, and maybe not, I don't know. I think romance scams should be in that top 5. And I think you're going to see investment scams creep into the top 5 in the next 6 to 12 months as the stock market goes through this very roller coaster experience. You are going to see a lot more predators out there trying to convince people to cash in their stocks and go with this wonderful new product, whatever it may be. So there are clearly red flags that we all need to be attuned to, and I'm sure you are. One of them is to do with the risk of investment fraud. And you know, when you get these calls, when you get these emails unsolicited telling you about this new fantastic opportunity, it can play on the mind, particularly when people are looking at their IRAs and they're looking at the falling stock market, and they're being scared by the news. And then the predator comes along and says, look, I've got the perfect solution for you. Watch this, would you?
Dr. Neil Gallagher is a premier true American with integrity in all his pursuits. His key goal is to help others take responsibility for their financial future. His life's passion is to help people retire safe, early, and happy. Steeped in history, Dr. Neil Gallagher earned his PhD from Brown University. He received his financial license and began working as a broker with firms in New York and St. Louis. Shortly after this period, Dr. Gallagher determined that the financial world of selling stocks and bonds, mutual funds, CDs, and more was not effectively educating the public. As he puts it, I dumped big broker and developed my own company dedicated to educating, empowering, and encouraging people whom are now his clients.
I strongly believe that as a society, we some time ago crossed a threshold in which a great number of individuals today give up on themselves too easily. We've raised a generation who not only looks to others to rescue them in virtually every matter concerning their lives, but one that also demands that others, whether parents, friends, employees, or the government, immediately solve their problems to their liking. Freedom requires education and empowerment, and I educate and empower clients. Less government, more personal responsibility, and with the help of God, a better world.
Dr.
Pretty impressive, right? And can you see a lot of older adults really being taken by that? He's got the preacher look, he's got the preacher feel, he's got the words, he's got the backing of the academia. And yet, 3 months ago, sentenced to 3 life terms in prison for ripping off older Texans. He ran a Ponzi scheme, bilking senior citizens out of millions of dollars. The prosecutor's office in Tarrant County in Fort Worth said he ruthlessly stole from his clients who trusted him for almost a decade. He amassed $32 million in loss to all of his clients. He worked his way around churches, preying on people who believed he was a Christian. The year before, he pleaded guilty to similar charges in Dallas, given 25 years in prison. You're going to see a lot more people like this guy out there. They're going to be targeting older adults through this investment crisis and trying to convince them that they are the safe harbor. Now, we had our own version of Mr. Gallagher. I was able to prosecute this guy called Jeffrey Milton. And he was just the same way. The older adults loved him. He taught the language. He gave them Christian messages, and yet he was ripping them off. He formed a non-profit. He even bamboozled the IRS into giving him a 501c3 called Senior Rescue. But all the time ripping off about 38 senior citizens in the San Diego County area. He faked an investment called private annuity. He cut and pasted from a legal document, and this was a fake, fictitious, but he would get $150,000 here from one person and then $200,000 from another person. It was crazy. And we also had this gemstone scam. This lady was from San Diego County. She fell for it, like so many others around the country. The crooks, the husband and wife, were living in a gated community in Rancho Santa Fe in a $2.3 million house, selling fake gems online and over the telephone. There he is, getting sentenced by Judge So. And then, of course, you've got the sweetheart scam. And that has really risen during the pandemic because of loneliness, because of depression. When people lose a loved one and they're looking for companionship, they go to these dating websites, and that's where the predators look. And that's where they're looking for their perfect victim. Look at this gentleman, 78 years of age, out of Virginia, swindled out of $600,000 by somebody claiming to be a 30-year-old widow. Happens everywhere. It's happening in San Diego. I love this slide because so many of these romance scams are actually being perpetrated from within prison walls, because it's so easy, unfortunately, to smuggle a cell phone into prisons in America. And what else can you do with your time? Rip off people by using your cell phone, targeting others. Listen to this story.
I look at it now and I think, how could I be so naive?
This woman is still healing after losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in a scam and has asked us not to use her name. The 79-year-old ballroom dance executive says it happened after she decided to use an online dating service.
He was calling all the time. Almost every day he would call to see how I was. He also realized how musical I was or am, and that I enjoyed dancing. So he would send a lot of music videos.
They decided to meet, but the man who said he was a general contractor abruptly needed to go to Malaysia for work. At one point, he said he needed money for a construction license.
The answers were always legitimate in my mind, and so I sent him the first $9,000.
Over several weeks, she sent more money. In all, more than $400,000.
And you know, what's striking about that victim is she's articulate. She is not in any way of diminished capacity, but her heart ruled her head. The danger with these romance scams is that some victims become what we call money mules. And if they continue to do that work as a money mule, despite being warned, they potentially could face prosecution. So within San Diego, there are money mules who started out as unsuspecting victims, but then were sucked into actually being a conduit for forwarding fraudulent money. And it is very important that we warn victims that they can end up becoming defendants in a courtroom. I want you to hear this story of 81-year-old Glenda Syme from Missouri. And listen, it's only a very short video, but listen to how she talks about my love, okay?
My name is Glenda and I'm 81 years old. In 2014, I met the love of my life online, and he told me that he was a U.S. citizen and was working in Nigeria. He asked me for money to help with his business and help leave Nigeria. Then my love had people send me electronics like cell phones so I could pawn them and send him the money. When I couldn't get the money that he wanted, he asked me to open personal and business bank accounts. Since 2015, bank employees, local police officers, and federal agents told me that my love was a scam and that I needed to stop or I could go to jail. I didn't listen to anyone else but my love, the love I've never seen nor spoken to. Now I don't have a choice of whom I'll listen to. On November the 2nd, 2021, I pled guilty to 2 federal felonies. I'll be listening to the judge now.
There she is, 81 years of age, and now is a convicted felon. A couple of weeks ago, Glenda was sentenced in a Missouri federal court to 5 years probation. She could have gone to prison for up to 5 years, but because of her cooperation and the fact that she was willing to do this public service announcement, the judge clearly made the right call here and did not give her any custody. But it's a lesson for all of us. Here is Glenda now, saddled with being a convicted felon. And what I'm also finding during the pandemic is that older professionals are being targeted. Now, I'm currently working with 2 California medical doctors, both physicians, husband and wife. They're both in their mid-70s, and they were victimized under the fake board representative extortion scam. The wife got a call from somebody claiming to be part of the medical board, saying that her license was in jeopardy as a physician because there was her name and profile had been linked to a drug seizure in the south of the country. And over time, both husband and wife bought into this scam. They both believed that their licenses were at risk, and they were advised to transfer all their money offshore. And they have lost $3.4 million. And they're still practicing medicine in California today. The grandma scam is alive and well during the pandemic. And in fact, we had a big press release a few months ago. Scott Perillo was instrumental in working with the federal authorities. And there were several San Diego County victims of the grandma scam. And they were part of a bigger circle of victims, and it became a big federal indictment, which it has been proved to be very successful.
Last December, Beth Baker received a call about her grandson, Will. Her grown son, Jim Baker, knew nothing of it at the time, but Will Brown was in danger. Trouble was, the phone call was a hoax.
I got a call one morning, and they said that Will was in Peru and that he was in trouble and that he had not been drinking, but someone in the car had been drinking. And there was an accident and someone was hurt.
It began with a request for $600 to help her grandson, but over the course of a week, the amounts got larger.
Now, Beth lost $63,000 to that grandma scheme, but she was one of multiple victims all over the country. And thanks to the great investigation by DA investigator Paul Holman, we were able to put this as part of a federal indictment. And over 50 individuals were indicted down in Texas. Here's another case where my victim in North County was brought to the CVS store to purchase gift cards by a taxi driver who was being paid by the scammer to take her there because she was convinced that her granddaughter was in trouble. And there they are at the counter, and he's on the phone with the crook. What about your computer? We've seen it over the pandemic, a lot more cases of hijacking of computers, where the scammers try to convince you that they work for Microsoft and they need to download software. And then, of course, they take control of your computer. And that way they'll download everything off your computer and use it to steal your identity, etc. The number of robocalls, don't you believe that they have risen during the COVID? And of course, they're also twisting and tweaking the pandemic to provide cures or stimulus payments, scams. AARP have been very involved with educating the public about COVID scams. 5 of the top ones, maybe not so much now, but vaccine scams, you cannot pay to skip the line. Of course, they're offering you that, or vaccine for sale from an online pharmacy, air filters that will prevent COVID from spreading through your house. And then errand scams. I've seen these on nextdoor.com. People offering to do your grocery shopping for you, taking your credit card or your debit card to purchase online or in the store. At-home test kits for testing, posing as Medicare representatives. And then several months ago, remember how the governor of California was providing incentives through the lottery scheme, to get the vaccination? Again, the predators jumped in on that one and were tweaking that one. So we had to watch out for that. Scammers posing as government officials, informing recipients they won a lottery, but then asking for bank details. But they can also appear in person. COVID doesn't mean it's just online or can come through and knock on the door. These cases happen. I had one case where somebody posed as an FBI agent, giving my victim in Point Loma a fake badge and a fake business card. But it's not just scammers taking advantage of this isolation. Family members living at home with mother, or who've come home to live with mother because they're no longer working. And this has created extra tension, extra problems. And this is the classic abuser. He's the son living at home with his mother. And in almost every single case, he's lazy and unemployed. And he always uses it as an excuse, I've got a bad back. And he's addicted to drugs, typically meth, alcohol, or gambling. He feeds his habit off his mother by stealing her jewelry. And then when she finds out, there's this physical altercation. So this is very, very typical. I like this poster. What do you call someone who abuses an 80-year-old woman? Son. And then we've also got to consider residents of our various long-term care facilities. You know, in San Diego County, we have over 80 skilled nursing facilities. We've got many hundred of assisted living facilities all over the county. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, as we know, residents were prevented from having family members come to visit them. In some cases, nursing home residents would go out, but then they wouldn't let it back into the facility because of the coronavirus. So there's been a lot of upheavals. And then the number of cases of COVID in nursing homes, as we know, has really escalated, sometimes because of lack of staffing, lack of hygiene, poor record of neglect issues, stuff like that. And this has received a lot of media attention and still is receiving media attention. And in fact, some reports have come out about the urgent need for improvement in staffing. You know, there's a wonderful program in San Diego County called Choose Well. If ever you have the situation where you need to be looking for a community in which you would think about either that you want to move into or to place a loved one into, Choose Well San Diego is a wonderful website issued by the county that gives you a list of various options. So that's called Choose Well. And we've seen, unfortunately, the number of neglect deaths surge simply because there is such an abysmal track record with staffing issues in so many of these communities. So the same kind of headlines appear in long-term care facilities. Look at this one in Colorado, in Denver. A temporary caregiver who was on probation for robbery was hired to fill a COVID-related staff shortage at a community. And what did she do? Steals the engagement ring and credit cards. We also need to understand how the pandemic is impacting elder abuse cases within our criminal justice system. It has had a huge impact on the way that prosecutors are doing business. And as you probably know, the courts were closed for many months. What happened to all those cases? They've literally stacked up. It's also meant that to avoid overcrowding, to avoid trying to have a spread of COVID through the jails, many defendants have received the benefit of early release. So now we're getting more and more defendants out into the community. And defendants charged with elder abuse crimes are typically being released without having to spend more than 24 hours in custody, pending trial. And now the trial date is being pushed back into not just months, but into over a year. And what happens if you have an elderly victim who needs to testify, and yet we don't have a hearing for several months? You might lose the opportunity to preserve that victim's testimony through cross-examination, because they may die before it ever gets to a preliminary hearing. So a lot of different ramifications. And I don't want to get legal here, but there is such a thing called a Crawford problem within the prosecutorial world. And we've got to figure out a way how to preserve elderly victims' testimonies, particularly when there's a gap between the time when the arrest takes place and when the preliminary hearing occurs. How do we preserve the victim's testimony in the event that the victim then subsequently dies before testifying in a preliminary hearing? We've got to figure out a solution to this problem. We've got to also do more networking. As we come out of this pandemic, the opportunity is there through Zoom, but also through in-person meetings, because we've learned in San Diego, I think successfully, that we can only do a very little bit on our own, but when we work together in a collaborative team as part of a multidisciplinary team, it works wonders. If you haven't heard about this, I would urge you to consider joining the Elder Protection Council. It meets every few months. You can certainly call San Diego DA's office, Elder Abuse Unit, to ask when the next one is. And you'd be more than welcome to join it. They've been online through Zoom. You can certainly email me, and I'll give you my email at the end of this presentation, and I can put you in touch with the coordinator for that Elder Protection Council. But this is a great way of networking, of sharing information, and of being part of the solution in San Diego County. I talk about the importance of the 3 C's: collaboration, cooperation, and communication. It's terrific. So finally, before I turn it back to Mark, when hopefully you will have some questions, and I really would urge you to type in some questions so that we can have a little bit of a discussion here. Here's a few resources to leave with you. First of all, I'm very proud of this fantastic program out of the National Center on Elder Abuse, of which I had a small part in helping to design. It's called EAGLE, which stands for Elder Abuse Guide for Law Enforcement. It is my hope that within 3 years, every single law enforcement agency in America will have had training in this program. It's a very user-friendly program. It's free. There's a website. This is how you get to it. And so any of you who have colleagues, friends in law enforcement, whether it be in San Diego, San Francisco, Minnesota, wherever, please, will you tell them about this phenomenal resource on a website? It really helps every single first responding police officer to know what to do if they get a call of an alleged elder abuse case. Don't forget AARP. I hope many of you are AARP members. I think it's the best value in town. You know, once a year, they ask you for $18. And if you become a new member, they get a nice new tote bag. I mean, it's just terrific. But they have a great fraud watch network. And so I would really urge you to take advantage of that, because it gives you up-to-date articles. The newsletter is very good, very informative. And they have podcasts and other webinars which are free of charge. So excellent resource. Federal Trade Commission, they're really up on the coronavirus scams. So you can go to the FTC website, and if you hear of a particular scam, you can report it at that website, reportfraud.fdc.gov. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they are a great agency as well, federal agency, and they've got some excellent material on their website, which you can download free of charge. I can honestly tell you, I mean, one of the articles, protect yourself financially from coronavirus. Very, very good. So as I wrap it up here, physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, financial exploitation, which will it be today? The sad part is it's happening. Something will be happening somewhere in San Diego County right now. An older adult is being targeted, exploited, taken advantage of. It could be your neighbor. And maybe it is you that is going to be the person that will actually prevent it or stop it while it's happening and bring some kind of resolution to an existing problem. If you suspect that somebody in your sort of circle of friends, relatives, etc., is a victim of elder abuse, this is the number you should call. It's a 24/7 number. It goes straight through to Adult Protective Services, 339-4661. Okay. And there is my phone number. There's my email, paul@greenwoodlawcorp.com. And if you are really bored, you can even go to a little website that I've developed called greenwoodlawcorp.com. But with that, and we have about 8 minutes left, I'm going to hand this back to Mark. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, thank you very much, Paul. And you know, I don't know if I can thank you enough for even helping me back in the day when, remember, I picked up the phone and called you, and in the process of my father being had fraud attempt against him. And there's not one of us who doesn't have some story, family member, friend, that has been through these horrible crimes at the most vulnerable time of their lives. So the information that you share, and that's why we bring you back regularly. Hopefully you're okay with that.
Absolutely. I love it.
Because this is a reiteration of information and education like this. You can't get enough. Oh, there's something on your screen that's blocking. Oh, there it is. So there's your phone number there. That was one of the questions I had, but I do have a couple questions. The first one, and I just wasn't sure because of the videos on here. We always get this question: would you be willing to share your slides?
Yes, I would. And what I would do, though, is I would take out some of the photos,
right,
and the videos, but I'll certainly, the bullet points, yeah, I will be, and I can do it in a PDF format. Mark, I can forward it to you. I don't know if you have a database you can then.
Yeah, actually, what I would ask of folks that are interested in receiving a PDF version of your presentation, all they have to do is email us. And I'm going to bring it up on the screen. I don't need to bring it up on the screen. It's just, you want me to go ahead and do that real quick? I can do that.
Sure.
Just give me 1 second here. I'm going to bump this up so people could see it. All you have to do is shoot us an email at the email address I'm about to show you. Send us an email there at resdec@resdec.net. And once I receive Paul's PDF version of his PowerPoint, I'd be happy, or staff would be happy to send it out to you. So that's an area where you can do that. And then I don't know if you wanted to bring your slide back up, Paul, your last one, just so in case people still want to see.
Oh, sure.
Your contact information. That was one of the questions too, was a phone number. And as I was typing in the response, you brought it up on the screen. So.
All right, now you can, okay, there we go.
Okay, questions. I'm disabled and having trouble getting caregivers that are not doing their responsibilities. I have a live-in caregiver, but they don't do their jobs and have trouble getting rid of them so that I can get someone new to help me and my family. I am out of IHSS, and I believe that's in-home supportive services. Do you have any advice, or is there anything I can do?
If you have a live-in caregiver, that there are red flags just with the fact that they're living there. And I've had a number of situations where the person refuses to leave and they claim that they've got some kind of security of tenure there. So if you have somebody that you want to get rid of in terms of they're not doing their job and they refuse to leave, I think you certainly do need to talk to somebody, maybe at Elder Law, Legal Services, San Diego, and see about doing some kind of unlawful detainer action to evict them. I always recommend that if you're wanting a caregiver, don't go through word of mouth, don't go through recommendations. I know it costs more, but it's honestly better to go through a licensed, bonded, insured agency, because if you get a bad one, at least you've got somewhere that you can turn to get compensated for any losses or damage that is caused. But choosing a caregiver is one of the most important decisions we'll ever make. And when you do, lock up the jewelry at all times, because that's the first thing that gets stolen.
Okay, next question. I have problems with subcontractors and that they don't do what they're supposed to do. And I can't get the police to do anything, even though it could be thousands and thousands of dollars.
Did they say contractors?
Contractors.
Okay, then certainly, and I understand that, because as soon as you mention contractor to police, they typically go, well, that's a civil matter, and it's not. We've had great success with working with the Contractor State License Board, CSLB. Go onto their website and actually call the CSLB office in San Diego. They have some phenomenal investigators there, and we've done some very successful prosecutions, both of licensed and unlicensed contractors. If you've if you've lost money, if they haven't done what they promised to do, if they've taken your money, if they've taken an excessive deposit, these are all crimes. And the police should not be telling you it's a civil matter, but your best bet is to go straight to the Contractor State License Board.
Sorry, I'm just gathering questions as we're going along here. There's a couple more coming in. Next question is, I had my car stolen from the dealership when I took it in for servicing. It was a 2014 black Mercedes, and the police, the DA, and many other agencies refused to help me.
See, I don't get that. If your car was stolen, you're a victim. Look, again, I would say this. If you think that the DA, my former office, ignored you and said, we're not going to do anything about it, write a letter. Write a letter to Summer Stephan. She's phenomenal. And she will make sure that somebody will listen to you. A victim advocate will talk to you. And let somebody reevaluate that case. And so a 2014 black Mercedes is not a misdemeanor theft. That is a felony theft. It's worth over $950. So I just don't get that response. There's something weird about that. But please write a letter to the DA and mention that I suggested you do that.
Yeah, bring that hammer down. I love it. Okay, we're getting more questions here. I'm gathering them. Let's see. Next one is, CVS has a notice on the register that alerts purchaser of a gift card that gift cards can be used to defraud. Buyer selects yes to acknowledge. Is Paul aware of this feature? Is it required or CVS specific?
I've noticed, yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I've noticed it. It's more vendor by vendor. Some stores are doing it more prominently than others. I think it's obviously sensible. And here's the reason. More and more family members, as a trend, are trying to sue financial institutions and or CVS and or Walgreens when they discover that the financial institution and or CVS were responsible for allowing this person to walk in and buy gift cards, which were then scratched off and the numbers given to the crooks. So I think more and more stores are trying to prevent that kind of civil litigation by showing that they are trying to educate the public. Here's another issue, though. I'm also seeing that some law enforcement agencies are saying, well, you were warned. You were told that it was a scam. Well, it's your own fault. Therefore, there's no crime. Again, I disagree with that. If you have been defrauded, even if you didn't follow the advice shown on the notice, you're still a victim.
Next question. Last month, SDG&E doubled my bill from $159 the previous month to $357. I can't get no one to help. Their man came out last month and changed my utility box, and they won't answer the phone. And when I go to their office online, there's no one there.
Yeah, and you know what? Next month is probably going to go up double again. I mean, this is frightening stuff, I know. And all I would do is write a letter. I'm a great fan of writing letters, and I learned it from my mother, my late mother, bless her heart. She was an avid letter writer. And for example, when Prince Harry was in his, heyday, troublesome youth, he did some stupid things. My mother was really upset with Prince Harry. So what did she do? She wrote to him. Did she get a response? You bet she did. Letters cannot be ignored. So you need to write to SDG&E and send a copy to the media, to the Union Tribune or whoever, just so that SDG&E know that other people are seeing how SDG&E are going to respond. Letters get action.
Do you know of a resource that I can contact in San Diego that I should call about the contractor that I referenced earlier?
Oh, I would call the Contractor State License Board, yeah, and speak to somebody locally there. They're in Sorrento Valley.
Contractor State Licensing Board.
Yes, CSLB.
CSLB. Okay,
Yeah,
next question.
CSLB. It's cslb.ca.gov.
Okay. If an adult child embezzles money from a parent's bank account, can they avoid jail time if the money is paid back?
Well, yes, they can, particularly in COVID-related times when a, quote, non-violent case is adjudicated. And obviously the parents will probably argue to the judge, don't send my son to jail. He's done the right thing. He's repaid me. It was a bad thing what he did, but he's learned his lesson. So I think there is a possibility, or a strong possibility, if he's got no prior record, that is, that he won't get any jail time, or if limited jail time. But the underlying reason, why did he steal the money? That's more important. Did he have an addiction? And if so, that must be addressed. So I'm hoping that a judge would then set conditions of probation which would tackle the actual problem that caused the son to steal in the first place.
And I have one more question, unless anybody else has any, as I'm asking this question. And that is, first of all, kudos to your presentation and your content. And they're just wondering if there's a general education campaign available in Spanish.
Great question. You know, I know there's literature through the DA's office in Spanish, some pamphlets and brochures, but this is something we need to work harder at better doing, is reaching out not just to our Spanish-speaking friends and neighbors in the community, but to also friends and neighbors of other languages as well. And I think this is something that we need to spend more time developing.
That's the last question, Paul.
Terrific. Well, thank you.
I think we're good. And once again, thank you very much on behalf of our board of directors and all of our members for this great information. And maybe we'll see you at a future roundup that we talked about earlier.
I'll look forward to that. Thank you so much, Mark. And thanks everybody.
Excuse me.
Oh, somebody has a question. Carlos, you want to ask?
Yes. What are your fees if you take a case?
He asked if, do you have fees if you take a case?
Oh, well, Carlos, that's very sweet of you to ask that, but I don't actually take cases myself. What I do is I offer myself to other lawyers who take cases. If you want to email me as to why you need an attorney, I may be able to give you 2 or 3 recommendations or proposals as to who to contact.
Can you please place again your email, because it was too fast?
Too fast. Okay, here we go. All right. Let me do a screen share. All right, there we are. It's paul@greenwoodlawcorp.com. Okay.
And Paul, there was a follow-up to an earlier question. I'll go ahead and ask that. You talked about that police say it's a civil matter, and you indicated it wasn't. What can I do about that?
Well, I think they'll know what my response is. Write a letter to the chief of police, or if it's the sheriff's office, and with a copy to Summer Stephan's office at the DA's office. You know, I've seen this time and time again. When I was, the head of the elder abuse prosecution unit, if somebody felt that something wasn't receiving attention and they wrote a letter, within an hour, it would come down from the 13th floor and be on my desk. and you do not mess around with that. Okay, I need to make some action here. Letters get results. And when you write the letter to the chief of police about why it's not a civil matter, tell them about EAGLE, Elder Abuse Guide for Law Enforcement. Say, hey, this is a great opportunity to learn through EAGLE.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hey, everybody, I just want to thank you all for attending today. Don't forget next Tuesday, March 15th, same time, 10 a.m. We will have our presentation by Kathy Purdon from Nationwide on the San Diego County Deferred Compensation Program. Hope to see you all there. With that, I'm going to wish you all a great rest of your day. And once again, Paul, cheers.
Cheers to you too, Mark. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.